In the early 1960s, the United States and Soviet Union were in the midst of a tense space race. NASA was in the process of testing the first Apollo module with the goal of reaching the moon. The Apollo 1 mission turned out to be a disaster, but it led to a turning point in NASA regulations, design, and further space exploration. If we die, we want people to accept it. We're in a risky business, and we hope that if anything happens to us, it will not delay the program. The conquest of space is worth the risk of life. Gus Grissom. Throughout World War II, there were two sides, the Allies and the Axis. The United States, Soviet Union, and Great Britain were the three major countries of the Allies. Following the end of World War II, the Cold War's ideas and fear of communism spread throughout Europe and invaded the rest of the world. When nations are at war, they find a common enemy. The United States and Soviet Union's enemy was Germany. After the war, their ideas of defense and security were completely different. The United States did not know if their enemy was the Soviet Union or communism. The space race was just one aspect of the Cold War. On October 4, 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite, into space. The United States, striving to match the Soviet Union, attempted to launch a small satellite that rose 2 feet off the ground and then fell. This was the first embarrassing failure of the United States. Yet it did not halt their desire to put a man on the moon and was a crucial moment for the development of NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which was established on October 1, 1958. This was the United States' direct response to Sputnik. In the spring of 1961, Kennedy addressed Congress asking them to approve sending a man to the moon.
I therefore ask the Congress, above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested for space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
Virgil, Gus Grissom, Edward Wright, and Roger Chaffee were chosen to fly Apollo 1, the next step of carrying on Kennedy's dream.
How are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between three buildings? I can't hear a thing you're saying. Jesus Christ. I said, how are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between 2 or 3 buildings?
They wouldn't have seen the spark that started the fire because it was behind a panel door down below Gus's feet. Because of the oxygen, the spark was able to jump out to the nylon netting under the seats. Gus probably saw it first because it was closest to him.
Fire! We got a fire in the cockpit!
The procedure would have had Gus push down Ed's headrest so that Ed could start turning the latching.
We got a bad fire!
By now, the temperature and pressure were astronomical.
The contributing factors to the fire were deficiencies in the design, manufacture, and inspection of the spacecraft, schedule pressures on NASA and North America, poor communications between system groups, and no procedures for fire evacuation and rescue teams had been established for this type of module testing.
People always knew that someone might die during the making of Apollo, but no one ever expected it to be during a test or on a launch pad. Because of that, they were unprepared. America was in the middle of the Vietnam War, and they were determined to not make the loss of Apollo a waste. The space agency insisted that the door to the command module pull inward, not outward, making it impossible to open the latch from the outside. There were 3 layers to the door. The inner layer consisted of 6 latches and multiple drive bars. The second layer had 22 latches and an assortment of other locks. And finally, the outer layer, which was very thin, was meant to come off in space. This is a clip from the movie Apollo 13.
Yeah, it did. I knew the astronauts in the fire. All of them.
Could that happen again?
Well, I'll tell you something about that fire. A lot of things went wrong. The door, it's called the hatch. They couldn't get it open when they needed to get out. That was one thing. And, well, a lot of things went wrong in that fire.
Did they fix it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We fixed it. It's not a problem anymore.
Some of the combustible materials on the spacecraft were Velcro, cotton, vulnerable wiring, and plumbing. One thing Apollo 1 instigated was more research in fireproof and fire-resistant materials. Before the fire, the astronauts had suits that were made largely of cotton. After the fire, NASA searched for new materials that would be suitable for fire safety and still be lightweight. The solution was Nomex. Nomex fit all the requirements and was immediately placed in use. Today, Nomex is used for everything from oven gloves to suits for race car drivers, firefighters, and astronauts, to car parts and spark plug protectors.
Also, NASA immediately replaced using 100% oxygen during a test to using the normal air mixture of oxygen and carbon dioxide, making it less of a breeding ground for fire. The death of the astronauts was caused because of the inhalation of toxic gases, not because of the 2nd and 3rd degree burns. After NASA's investigation of the fire, they immediately placed new regulations and safety requirements for its staff and grounds. Fire safety training for the staff would be necessary. This was a critical moment for the invention of some of the soundest safety practices and laws in place today.
NASA would later on, in 1969, land the first man on the moon and beat the Soviet Union in the space race. Following that achievement, NASA continues to do research and is a leader in space exploration.
Apollo astronauts Roger Chaffee, Edward White, and Gus Grissom lose their lives in a tragic flash fire aboard their grounded space capsule. The tragedy occurred during a simulated countdown for the first flight of the Apollo program, whose goal is to put a man on the moon by 1970. Grissom and White were veterans of spaceflight, Chaffee a rookie. During a drill similar to this, the entire 3-man crew was engulfed by flames. A blue ribbon panel of space experts is investigating, aided by impounded NASA films and tape recordings. Grissom was one of the 7 original astronauts. White was America's first spacewalker. Chaffee, never in space, had long experience as a jet test pilot. He was proud and happy that his first flight was to initiate the Apollo program. When the tragedy struck, one of the astronauts shouted, "Fire in the spacecraft!" In a few seconds, all 3 were victims of the swift inferno which left the capsule a blackened shell. One reporter said it looked like the inside of a furnace. Investigators theorized that perhaps a short circuit or electrical overload may have sparked the blaze. 27 would-be rescuers were all overcome by smoke and heat. Apollo astronauts Chaffee, White, and Grissom, martyred heroes who gave their lives in total dedication to duty. Their memory will forever be honored.